Paul Cohen, we got John Hughes, Butch Swank, Andrew Sun, and Fred Forbes.
Okay. So I'm not sure why Dawn was saying there's only
John
4.
Hughes is RSM. He's not an audit committee member.
Who's that?
Right.
John Hughes is with RSM.
Oh, I'm sorry, John Hughes is that's
All right, so
committee
there's
member.
5 here.
5.
All right, so that's a quorum, so we could proceed.
Yeah. John, let me know when you start recording.
We are recording now.
All right. Rob, do you want to start off with anything as far as the process? You want me to go ahead?
No, I'll just say to start off with, I'm here for Kathy. She's on vacation. Good to see some of you, like Mr. Cohen, who I haven't seen in years. But I would just get off to you, Dave. Dave's going to start with the nominations, and we'll follow a typical nomination process for the chair and the vice chair. And obviously, with 5 members, it'll require 3 votes for someone to carry the chair and the vice chair. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the July 9th, 2025 meeting of the Audit Committee of the School District of Lee County. The time is 5:35 p.m. The meeting is called to order. I'll be acting as the presiding officer until the members of this committee have chosen a chair and a vice chair, at which time the newly elected chair will take over as the presiding officer of this meeting. I will first call for nominations, first for the chair. Once a member has made a nomination, I will first then verify that the nominee is able and willing to serve and consents to the nomination. Once all nominations have been made, I will call the nominations for a vote in the order in which the nominations have been received. This will be a voice vote. Please remember to vote yes the member you want or you have elected, and no if the member you do not want to be elected. Once we have received a simple majority vote for a particular candidate, that person will be elected as the chair and no further votes will be taken. If you go through all the nominees and no candidate receives a majority of the votes, we will begin the voting process again from the top until one candidate receives a majority of the votes. As there are currently 5 members of the committee present, meaning 3 votes for one candidate will consider it be a majority. So does everybody understand what I just read? Is that clear? Any questions before I begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will now call for nomination for the position of chair of the audit committee. Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Paul
Butch
Cohen.
Swank.
Nope, I decline.
All right, so I know Butch, go ahead. Butch, can you go ahead and start off, please? You started.
I was going to say Paul Cohen, please.
All right.
I couldn't do anywhere near a good of a job as you do, sir.
I appreciate that, Butch, but unfortunately, per policy, I can no longer serve as chair. So I am going to nominate Butch Swank as the incoming chair for the committee.
I've too much on my plate. I have no interest in doing that. Happy to be a audit committee member, but a leadership position is not for me. I wouldn't be able to allocate the time to do a good job.
Okay, so we have obviously Paul Cohen cannot be chair again. We have Butch Swank, who's chosen not to run for that position, as I read before. Is there any other nominations for chair?
So we have to have a chair and a vice chair, folks. So as difficult as that may be. And you can nominate yourself.
Andrew, you want to do this?
Yeah, I can. I'll serve as chair.
Okay, so I got Andrew's son, who has nominated himself to be chair. Do I have any other nominees for chair, the audit committee? And just one more time to make sure, are there any other nominations for chair beyond Andrew's son? Anybody else? Just want to make sure. All right. Hearing none, we will begin with the vote. Again, this will be a voice vote. In favor, say aye, and those opposed say no. And this is for it's going to be for the election of Andrew's son as chair. So I'm going to ask each member to vote. We'll record the votes. After the votes have been completed, we'll count the votes and read the results. So I'm going to start off with Paul Cohen,
Aye.
Jim Ward,
Aye.
Butch Swank,
Aye.
Andrew's son,
Aye.
and Fred Forbes.
Aye.
So the
Aye.
results are 5 votes in favor and 0 opposed. The ayes have it. So Andrew's son is now elected as chair for the audit committee.
You have a strong mandate with unanimous voting, sir.
Congratulations. So we do have one more. And that's going to be the election process for the vice chair. I will now call for nominations for the vice chair. This process will be the same as that of the chair. So do I have any nominations for vice chair? And again, you can nominate yourself as well. Anybody for vice chair?
Return the favor and nominate Paul Cohen.
Paul, are you willing to be vice chair, run for vice chair?
I think I need a point of order on this, Dave, if I'm allowed to take that role.
I need to weigh in, but I need to look at the policy, frankly. So it'd be helpful if someone else would be nominated, but that's okay. You're gonna have to give me a second here.
Yeah, I'll make sure as well too. In the meantime, is there any other nominees for vice chair? Okay, let's let Rob look at the policy. Let's verify the policy first. And yeah, just give us a few minutes. We can verify if that's a possibility.
Traffic. I'm gonna sit here, but traffic's terrible. You can't hear me.
In the interest of saving time, perhaps we get a Mr. Ward.
It only prohibits a chair from serving consecutive years. It doesn't say vice chair, so I think Mr. Cohen's okay.
Okay. Mr. Cohen, is that position? Are you willing to take that position if nominated?
I will accept the position.
Is there anybody else that wants to nominate for the position of vice chair? Okay, with that in mind, again, the same thing, I'm going to ask each member to vote for the position of vice chair. This will be Paul Cohen for the position of vice chair. Again, once I call on you, please say aye if you're in favor of Paul Cohen being vice chair, or no for Paul Cohen being opposed to him being vice chair. So I'm going to start with Fred Forbes.
Aye.
Aye. Andrew Sun.
Aye.
Butch Schwenk.
Aye.
Jim Ward.
Aye.
And Paul Cohen.
Aye.
So that's 5 votes in favor and 0 votes opposed. The ayes have it. And Paul Cohen is now the elected vice chair. Congratulations. So again, at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our new elected chair, Andrew Sun.
All right. Well, pursuant to the agenda, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the April 14th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
For minutes, Don, I think that was Mr. Swank on the motion, Mr. Forbes on the second, Mr. Cohen was also on the second. Got a couple there. All right. Any hearing no amendments or discussion? All those in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none opposed, show the approval of the meeting minutes. And at this point, we will turn it over to RSM, Weiss and the team to get an update on the audit reports that have been submitted.
Hi, everyone. This is Clara Ewing from RSM. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can hear
ma'am.
you.
Fantastic. Clara Ewing, Managing Director with RSM, been working with Lee County Schools for quite some time now with the team. Matthew, who you're familiar with, he is on PTO this week. So my face you'll see, and I'm here with the team in our Tampa office. So we decided to close out our fiscal year 25 internal audit plan and providing the status and report outs of our remaining audits. So first on deck is going to be our follow-up report. So I'll turn it over to Weiss, who you're all familiar with. He'll go over the follow-up report with you all.
Don, if you don't mind granting me in the meeting privileges to share content, I can pull that report up for everyone's context.
Okay, let me see. Okay, I have you as the Florida Tampa group, right?
If you could share with John Hughes, I joined separately.
Okay,
Okay.
I gave John Hughes permission already.
Got it.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and get us started. Good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations, Andrew and Paul, on your new roles. Excited to work closely with you. We have a few items to walk you through today. Like Clara said, we'll be presenting the final items of our audit plan tonight, and very, very excited to share the results. We want to start first by talking through the follow-up results and the dashboard that we've sent out. After this, we will talk through our ESC services, internal audit report, and the observations within that report before concluding with the incident response public report that is delivered, and obviously talking about next steps in this upcoming fiscal year. So if I can, I'll just jump right into it. Follow-up dashboard that you're seeing here on the screen shows and indicates some significant progress as it relates to follow-up testing. As a reminder for the members, as well as the other participants on the call, follow-up is a very integral part of our internal audit process. This is the process we go through by which to validate that the management action plans that were stated in our previous audit reports have been implemented and have addressed the underlying risks that were identified in those internal audit reports. So you'll see on the dashboard here, we have 8 audit reports that were within the scope of our follow-up testing this fiscal year. Of the 8, 3 of which were issued last year. There was a few also delivered in 2023, and then we have 2 as far back as 2021. So what this dashboard will tell you is the total number of findings between those 8 reports, which totaled 38. And it also tells you how many we previously closed. So through our prior follow-up reports, we were able to close 11 findings, which of course leaves us with the 27 that remain, and we're within the scope of this audit, this round of follow-up testing. So very happy to say we were able to close 9 items this round of testing. So that's 41% of the items that were ready for testing this go around. So some significant progress, probably the largest year-over-year audit or closeout that we've seen as it relates to audit items. So very happy to present that. There were 10 or about 45% who of these items that did push their ETCs. And in the body of this report, we highlight some of the reasons by which those were pushed. Some of those are pushed because they have had experienced some resource or turnover, I should say, within their department, specifically employee timekeeping, where some of the managers specifically involved in that audit and responsible parties related to those management action plans have turned over. So we have experienced some pushes as it relates to those observations. But overall, very pleased with the results here. Closing out 9 of these is pretty incredible. I look at the HR audit in particular, although the data report's been open for a long time, the nature of those observations were fairly complex, and there's also been significant turnover in that area as well. So happy to report that audit report now is completely closed, and you'll see that here with 0 items remaining. There are a couple items that remain for some of those older reports, such as purchasing, and those are open for a variety of reasons. And again, we highlight some of those reasoning behind the body of this report. One of the comments that I'll make before I open it up to any questions you might have as it relates to follow-up, I think it would be in our best interest as we look to the next fiscal year to consider providing this dashboard at every meeting, at every quarterly meeting. As of now, at least through the history of our work with Lee, we've provided this on an annual basis as part of the audit plan. I think there's a benefit to providing this dashboard quarterly at each audit committee meeting as a means of just, again, enforcing accountability and providing some transparency as to how these things are progressing. And there's certainly some value. And we usually do that for many of our clients, but every client's a little bit different. That would be our recommendation, so that the committee has more visibility into these items. But I'll pause and open it up to the committee if there's any questions you have related to follow-up testing.
I'll look to the members. Did any members have any questions on any of the specific observations?
I do, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Cohen, absolutely.
I'm looking through the items in progress, and I understand that human resources, a lot of them were closed, but I'm looking here at the timekeeping. You still have 5 open items there. So human resources in my mind really isn't fully closed. Purchasing,
those are separate.
I think I made it pretty clear at prior meetings that has been an area that I have considerable concern with, and the fact that we still have the open issues in there, including contract compliance. The other thing that would be beneficial for us, and I agree with you, the dashboard is great. If you can indicate of the items that have been closed versus open, how many are high risk versus low risk. I would hate to see that only the low risk areas have been addressed and high risk items are still in progress.
We can do that.
Yeah, it's a great call out. We can certainly incorporate that.
With that,
And I
that
have a
concludes my questions.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. This is Melissa Giovanelli.
Hi, Mr. Giovanelli, go ahead.
So the timekeeping was a red flag for me because this actually was brought up in an audit back from 2000, I believe. I'm going to say 17, but in 2019, prior administration had to report to Tallahassee regarding the timekeeping, and required the district to implement such. I mean, and now we're in 2025 and this is still not resolved, is a huge flag for me. And so my question, and I know RSM has only brought it forward just recently, so I understand that, but I mean, the district has been well aware of the timekeeping issue. Like I said, it goes back at least 2019 when they had to report to the Florida auditor, and there's a committee that the district had to go and actually testify, and they were supposed to correct those items. And here we are in 2025, and that's not corrected. So I want the superintendent to be well aware, and we can talk more about that. But on the other hand, the question for RSM, is this common for you? There were several items that are still open that had deadlines that have already been, you've already surpassed that. And here we are today, and things are still not completed, and you're giving additional time. But is that common with districts to not take the advice of their auditor?
So great point. And just to be specific, we had 10 of the items that were ready for testing that were ultimately had their estimated completion dates pushed, which I think is your underlying point. Now, whether it's common is unique to the district. It depends on the action plan, right? And the complexity of the action plan. It's not uncommon for districts to push estimated completion dates. That's not what we would recommend, but sometimes it goes back to setting the correct estimated completion date to begin with and making sure it's not too aggressive where you can't meet it. I think as it relates to the items that I referred to, those 10 items that were pushed, 5 of those are those employee timekeeping items. So those 5 were all pushed from their original estimated completion date. And from our understanding, the reason why they were pushed was because there was some significant turnover in that team. I'm only providing you that comment for context. We're not saying that's a justification. We don't believe turnover should be the reason why items don't continue to be addressed. That's not what I'm saying. But for perspective, there was some key members of the team that were involved in our original audit and who were assigned as responsible parties for these items who have since left the district. So of course, there's going to be a transition in who's taking over those items. And I think you're seeing that reflected in these items being pushed. Some of the other items are related to system implementation. So one that comes to mind is contract compliance. They're looking for a contract management software. So it's clearly taken a little bit longer than maybe they were originally expecting to identify what that system or that software might look like. But they want to find the right software. So they needed some additional time, and that's the justification behind pushing it. But I agree with your sentiment. We certainly don't recommend pushing estimated completion dates. That's why we believe having this produced on a quarterly basis would provide accountability and visibility into kind of the progress that's taking place here, but not uncommon necessarily.
And this is Denise, the superintendent. I'd like to weigh in for just a moment. First of all, thank you, Ms. Giovanelli, for making reference to that situation back in 2000. I think you said 17 or 19. I'm just quickly writing down your notes. So here would be my expectation as the superintendent of this school district that turnover is not a good reason for those things to be pushed. And that goes to one of my concerns that I've had as the superintendent coming in is who is actually minding the store on the variety of audits we have. And you might recall that I recently asked Jennifer Cupid McCoy, our Chief Strategy Officer, to get her hands on all of our audits, to include the RSM audits. And so she has been very quickly trying to get her hands on all of the audits, and then her job is to track those. So if we start to get off track for some reason, she is kind of my gatekeeper on that. And Jennifer has been meeting with cabinet members and talking with them. So I will be happy to get with her to see if she was able to get with our staff about this and to find out what was the reason for the delay. Not that I'm questioning RSM. I totally agree that more than likely is the reason for the turnover of staff. But my goal is to make sure that we have processes in place. So in the future, that is not being used as what I would categorize as as the reason for that. So I see Dr. Savage's hand up. I'll turn it over to him. He may have additional information to share.
Yeah, I think it's good. Thank you, Dr. Carlin. Just wanted to kind of add, some color to these comments. It's great discussion. Just to give some, specificity on this, like timekeeping, for example, hugely important to us. The lead party that's responsible for, I think, the bulk of the action plan work on that would be your director of payroll, which for us is vacant and has been vacant for some time. So, and I say that to say, again, there's no excuse for it, but if you don't have a director of payroll that is in place in the organization, there is no one in that job, then would a payroll clerk be doing it? Probably not. They would not be, developing, retooling PeopleSoft and any of the tracking systems. That would have to fall to a leadership level. So then that either goes up the chain, is your CFO directly having to do that, or and again, that's where the idea of working to try to make sure that you have quality people in those pieces, because if you're trying to develop extensive standard operating procedures, if you're trying to mend your current applications that do this work and automate where functioning, it's just very complex work. And so when they establish deadlines that are, okay, we'll have that done by winter, I think that's where, and again, it's not excuses. There's no excuse. You have to make sure that you have multiple parties and that you have realistic expectations of the resources needed to do the various different systems that are there. But that's the advantage of this is, and again, a larger tracking mechanism for us. And I think the more frequent reporting, such as quarterly, does allow you for that. You're not just finding out a year later and saying, wow, that was a year ago. Now you're hearing every quarter the updates, and it allows at least every 3 months to be getting some meaningful updates of which of those areas are then even being prioritized within that area. You're working in standard operating procedures right now. Where are you at within the PeopleSoft? Like I just, for example, today received awareness through my meeting with our CIO about some of the PeopleSoft upgrades and work that has gone that directly ties back to this. So again, those are just things that are ongoing bodies of work, but wanted to make sure that we're elevating that too as well.
Thank you, Dr. Savage.
And thank you. I just wanted to make everyone aware of that, a little bit of history on that. And we have had turnover. Let's even just say in the superintendent. So we've had a lot of turnover. So hopefully now that we can get ahead of all of this. But I just think that it's important for everyone on here to be well aware that this timekeeping issue goes way back. And I know Dr. Carlin can get the information on that. I know that she wasn't part of that because it was actually recorded, and I don't believe Dr. Savage was there either. So you have to kind of go back. I believe they went in 2019, but I believe it was regarding the audit from 17-18 audit, but don't hold me to it. You can get the actual information but I think we just need to be, super aware of this situation and really, because when you have Tallahassee telling you to get this done, and here we are in 2025 and it's still not done, and they're asking for it to be done in December, I believe this one is, I'm very concerned. And I know they're looking at programs, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But I think our PeopleSoft, I don't know how compatible it is. Everything that was a lot of things. When I read all the audits, the PeopleSoft was probably the biggest red flag in there for me. Like it's not efficient or effective if we're still 2 and 3 years later still not with resolution on things that have been brought to our attention that needs to be corrected. And it's been identified, and then shame on us for not getting the job done. So I'm going to be really hard pressed. This is something I can't wait to have RSM present to the board and I will be bringing this up again to the board because everyone's kind of new on that as well regarding this. But I just want to, this is high alert for me because it's been so long and nothing's been fixed, and so I don't know what I have no one to blame, but because I can't, but the superintendent now who inherited it. So I'm excited about moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Yes. Okay. I agree with what Ms. Giovanelli was just saying about PeopleSoft. And my concern is when you're looking at an audit such as purchasing and procurement, which was performed in 2021, testing was obviously from period prior. And we are now 4 years later plus, and we still have an item in progress, which I'm believing is probably a PeopleSoft related issue. It's time to start putting mitigating controls in place. We can't live and worry about mitigating controls, not mitigating controls, I'm sorry, automated controls such as PeopleSoft. And if we keep relying on technology to get us to the finish line, no disrespect to the district, but we're going to be looking at these audit findings out there 3-4 years from now because technology keeps changing. Turnover occurs whether we want it to or not, and it's going to become problematic. I just look at several of these issues that are brought out, and we're looking at a number of them that are getting over 2 years old already. That's an awfully long time for findings to be sitting out there. And that goes back to my point from earlier. If these are low-risk findings, I could deal with them being in progress. If they're high, moderate, or high-risk findings, I have a very different perspective on where the focus is on addressing the audit findings.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Were there any other
I'd
members?
I'd like to throw in one more. I'm gonna save the rest of my comment for good of the order toward the end, but the fleet operations part is fascinating to me because I spent a lot of time trying to work with the district in the proximity plan, which was all centered upon creating neighborhood schools again and reducing the need for busing. And it's astonishing to see that there's over 250 buses sitting derelict. So let's just assume a bus costs $100,000. That's 25 million, according to my math, of just buses sitting there that have been driven to the point that they are no longer functional. So the obvious necessity for figuring out a better way to not go hither and yon across the county with these buses, because this is an ongoing thing. So it's just kind of curious to me that the district will spend $1.2 million for Davis Demographics to come up with the proximity plan, and we're still seeing this. Like, it's astonishing. It's, you just see 250 buses and you're like, yeah, it's 250 buses, but when you do the math, it's $25 million. I mean, that's a preposterous amount of money. So I'll save the rest for the good of the order, but I was just, I found it, I was shocked in the fleet operations aspect of this, that is a kind of ongoing issue.
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, just a follow-up on this. And I don't mean to belabor the point to any great extent, but I'm looking at 13 in progress and 5 that are open out of a total of 38. So we're approximately 50% that are still open or in progress. And I'm wondering, what is RSM's ability to take this up the chain of command and alert people that the process is broken? How do they bring this to the chain of command through the school district?
I think it goes back to Dr. Collins' comments about the committee, that the person they have now kind of over these audit observations and putting that accountability in place. So I'm thinking, our hopes is that with this additional movement on the district side, for these open observations, as we start to report out on a quarterly basis, we're going to start to see more and more of that closure and these items taking that priority. So I
Yeah,
think,
but
you know, back.
I'm looking at it more from the perspective of the day-to-day audit process that you go through. And when you hit roadblocks, how do you go about going around those roadblocks or finding a management team that'll address the issues on an ongoing basis before it gets to the audit committee?
So if you're asking during the course of an audit, if we have an issue getting a response or documentation or anything as it relates to our audit report, we've got a pretty good system for flushing those items out. We reach out through management to get those answers. If you're referring to the actual estimated completion dates and changing of those dates and those dates being pushed out into the future, we have, as you know, no control over that, right? That's a management decision. And that's what this committee is designed for, right? Is when you ask, you know, what's the governance structure, right? We flush and make that information ready for you and then ultimately take that information back to the board so that there can be a sense of accountability for management and getting those items remediated. I think it's important to say that, you know, there's been an evolution, you know, since 2021, for example, when the human resources audit was delivered, in the collaboration that we've had with the district. I think as much as we believe many of these items should be closed, I think what we're optimistic about is that we get responses way quicker from management and leadership at the district today than we certainly have in the past. And I think that goes back to the commitment to the function and new resources in place like Dr. Cuban-McCoy, who are going to help extend our message and reinforce our message around the importance of follow-up testing on a consistent basis, not just when we come in and do our follow-up testing. So I think those are the avenues that we've gone through to get these items addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
And I won't belabor because I want RSM to get to their reports and everything. So, and to add to that real quick is we need that our board auditor. So I wanted to circle back around with that because I think that with Dr. Cuban-McCoy, I think those will be key employees that will be, you know, hyper aware, bringing awareness to the board at the same time the district, like, so that collaboration, I'm hopeful that that will be key to the success of us moving forward. And with all the work that RSM is doing and pointing out, we can get to those, you know, get to correcting those sooner than they have been in the past. And that falls back, unfortunately, on, you know, since we've had administration changes quite a bit since, you know, even since 2020. So I think that we'll see a significant uptick. How about that? And I'm going to be positive because I think that we will be. So I think that just getting to the root of the issues is probably key for us right now, and identifying those and then really fixing them. And I think that's what Dr. Carlin is here for. So I'm excited about that. So thank you. And I have a lot of questions. So, but I want RSM to get to work and, you know, get to telling us about the report. Thank you.
Dr. Savage?
Yeah, just want to add more to what Ms. Giovanelli just said. You know, just first off, real credit to RSM and the thoroughness of their team and the work they do with our team. We do assign leads and so forth in the areas, but to give more clarity to what Dr. Carlin said earlier, while Dr. Cuban-McCoy is our Chief Strategy Officer, we really built a structure to have more of an organizational infrastructure to support all the findings across the entire organization, because some of them are financial, some of them are human resources, some of them are, we hired a director of risk and internal compliance who's a very experienced risk person, really understands risk models. And we find that to be very synergistic with this to start kind of being more proactive in the area of risk. As you know, a lot of the areas that we've had asked to be audited, we have self-identified that we want external views on that, and we own the idea that we want it reported to our board. So these aren't areas where someone's surprised finding it. It's areas we've unearthed to get additional eyes to create that sense of urgency and organizational commitment resource around. Additionally to that, we have an assistant director of internal compliance, and the whole function of that idea is to close that loop. So, this really falls on management to have to be responsive to all these ideas, but we recognize that individual managers are already doing a lot to try to carry on the day-to-day function. And so part of that idea of building that infrastructure to support this is to elevate it to that strategy level for that independence where they don't have responsibility for the outcome like the others, but to create that real focus in the organization to address that. And so we're very grateful for the board's internal auditor, which is RSM. They are the board's internal auditor, and we are very grateful for that firm because they have such, aside from just one person, they provide such expertise across quite a continuum. They have a number of folks well beyond the people on this call who really have been just instrumental as they work with our team. And it's our privilege to really be able to help that. But it is significant work. None of these things are easy to do. We don't ask them to audit simple problems. We ask them to go after very complex things, which often are a result of significant processes, standard operating procedures, significant infrastructure aspects such as PeopleSoft. Those things are never fixed in just a few months. They require programming. They require, detailed operations that then have to get transposed into your systems. There's lots of integrations across those pieces. So, just want to kind of highlight the complexity of this work, but our real commitment to that work. And I just want to highlight, because I don't think we mentioned those specific positions that now are on the managerial side that do allow for us to be more global, but also to create a lot more accountability within cycle beyond just the audit committee, the board auditor, and so forth.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. And I think I can speak for the board, the audit committee board, and just appreciation of that, in that management is taking these findings seriously. Mr. Forbes, then I have Dr. Carlin on deck.
Yeah, I've got two questions. One, how thorough do you audit the construction? Because that budget there is huge. I've worked many, many years in construction, ran for the state of Ohio about a $2 billion a year construction project. And your construction has had big problems in the past, and I'm hoping the new superintendent is getting that cleared up. But it needs to be really looked at. And whether it's the job of the audit committee or whoever, but that needs to be looked at. And the other thing I would like is, who can I get with to find out about these issues we're talking about, that not being on the staff, not being on the committee before, that I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to hear more detail, but I don't want to take up the time of this meeting to take a neophyte on the committee, getting them up to speed. But I'd like to get with somebody to hear what the real deal is on the timekeeping and all the other stuff that's been talked about. That's all I have to say, and let's get on with it.
Don, can we please get Mr. Forbes the initial finding reports for the eight reports in this follow-up testing, so we can have those? And then I also know we received an audit that dealt with the Riverdale expansion and testing, and I think that may be helpful for Mr. Forbes to get an idea of some of the work that RSM has already done when it comes to facilities and construction. And then after he's had a chance to review that, that may give him some ideas of places we need to continue to look and investigate, or that may suffice and answer his questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Dr. Carlin.
Thank you, Chairman Sund. I appreciate. First of all, I just want to thank the committee for the push and the conversation. I want to thank Dr. Savage for highlighting an area that I saw immediately upon coming into the superintendency, and that is, we have RSM audits, and they're fantastic. And like Dr. Savage said, we drive a lot of that work because we know where some of our areas of vulnerability are. So we certainly want to hear from you. We want to hear from RSM about our hunches, where we think there could be some areas of concern. And so that's why we bring those forward. But I also just want to highlight how important it is, as Dr. Savage said, that we are now allocating staff to look directly at that. There were some questions about management, oversight, who do you go to when there's questions? And I want to assure you that was my question too. When I came in as superintendent, not just the RSM audits, but the wide variety of audits we receive from the state. Who is minding the store? And that was the reason I, looked at Jennifer Cupid McCoy, as kind of the gatekeeper of that. Now we've been able to give her some staff to be able to work on her team, to be able to look at all of these audits and to say, hey, what's been done already? Great. How have we incorporated that into our standard operating procedures so that when we do follow-up testing, we don't say 6 years down the road, oh dear, that was something talked about 6 years ago. Now what happened? How did that fall off, right? And so that's part of Jennifer's job, is looking at sustainability of those pushes on our processes, and then her staff also being able to meet, and she able to meet with chiefs and other folks in our organization to say, hey, where do we stand on that? So if you've hit a block, if something is prohibiting you from moving forward on one of these actions, that's why Jennifer at the chief level has the ability to escalate that to our deputy superintendent or to me to say, hey, we may need some help here. And so it's just kind of adopting that whole philosophy of, we have guidance from RSM, we have actions that should be taken in order to help us become a world-class school system. And sometimes while we put plans into place, we think, oh, that's a great plan on paper. When we implement it, oh dear, that wasn't the right fix, or we didn't take the right steps, or we have a block. We have a financial block. We have some type of personnel issue that can get in the way. We're not going to stop. We're not going to just say, oh, now we don't take action on these items. No, that's not what I'm interested in as the superintendent of the school district. What I'm interested in is that being elevated to Jennifer. Okay, Denise or Ken, this is what we need to move forward. And then we make that happen. So I just want to really underscore what Dr. Savage said, how important it is to us, and that we do take these seriously. And in my estimation, I think putting a team behind this at the district level, led by Jennifer, certainly does help. So enough said on that from me, and I look forward to the continued conversation with RSM. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just take the prerogative as chair to close out this. When I look, as we get ready to pull up the ESC, when I look at the follow-up testing, one of the things that just frustrates me, and I can imagine the public would frustrate, is if we look at contract compliance, observation 4, when it comes to invoice review and procedures, when we go back for testing and we can't see evidence of something as simple as timeliness when it comes to payment of invoicing and being compliant with statute, but also just not costing the district money in late fees or anything like that. I think that alludes to a little bit of what Mr. Cohen mentioned with the severity of some of these. When you look at some of these, if they seem like simple fixes. So I'm excited to hear that the district has put in place the resources and people to start to address this. And I'm excited to see this on a quarterly basis, so that this group can make sure that progress is occurring, but then also we can provide that intel to Ms. Giovanelli, as she can take that to the board to make sure that our elected officials also have the ability to put pressure when necessary to keep these things moving. So I think all of that puts us in a good direction, and hopefully we'll see the momentum follow. RSM team, feel free to jump into the ESE audit.
Wonderful. Appreciate the conversation. So like you said, we'll go ahead and now transition to our exceptional student education services internal audit. I have Jack here today. John, he goes by Jack, so you'll see John on there. Jack led the audit here. He'll walk us through the background, our objectives and the scope, what exactly we were trying to achieve. He'll talk through, obviously, the observations that were noted through this project, and we'll briefly kind of answer, any questions you might have as it relates to our recommendations and the management responses that were included. Of course, we'll defer any specific questions as it relates to management's response to management on the call, but excited to share this report. So, Jack, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Ice. Appreciate seeing everyone here today. I'm going to start us off on page 2 of the report, our executive summary. A couple points that I just want to highlight here. You'll see that in the bottom right-hand corner, we do have 2 high-risk observations related to our review. The rest of the background of our report really highlights some of the key components of the ESC program here at the district. We talk about the eligibility requirements to become an ESC student, some of the programs, services, and accommodations available to those students, as well as applicable documentation, regulatory compliance components, student IEPs. Those are individualized educational plans by which compliance and services and accommodations for those students are derived from. So I'll quickly walk us through. You can see on page 3 then our 2 observations highlighted a little further. We have development and delivery of ESC services or accommodations. And secondly, ESC delivery consistency and maturity. The rest of our background, again, highlights for the readers context of various components of the ESC program. You'll see a couple process flows to help acclimate the overall life cycle of ESC administration. That I think we have a really good chart there on page 7, which kind of highlights that IEP development. Some of the different disabilities, exceptionalities, and programs are further highlighted. You'll see a couple additional charts to the background, more programs highlighted on page 10. And then we get into some of the key regulatory requirements on page 12. This drove a lot of the compliance aspects of our review. And I'll momentarily talk through some of the items in the scope of our review. This is inclusive, but not limited to the various federal, state of Florida regulation and district policies and procedures by which we evaluated compliance. Any questions on the background of the report before I walk through our objectives and approach and some of the audit procedures performed?
Mr. Ward, is that a question or are you just cleaning your screen?
No, I'm just cleaning my screen.
All right.
Perfect. A couple key evaluated procedures that were performed as part of our review. We did assess district policies for compliance with federal and state requirements. That includes the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We assessed the review and approval process for individualized education plans, including reviewing whether goals were defined, measurable, and aligned with present levels of performance. We verified compliance with required timeliness for initial IEP development and reevaluations on an annual and 3-year rolling basis. And then finally, we performed detailed testing across 40 different IEPs, which we judgmentally selected from the population to provide our sample with a risk-based diversity and a variety of different sampling criteria to provide enough diversity within our sample to evaluate those measurable items. So we looked at some of the implementation of within that sample, we looked at the implementation of IEP services to identify gaps between planned and delivered support. We reviewed applicable progress reporting and the practices to determine whether reports were being issued according to the schedule stated within that IEP. We assessed the documentation and appropriateness of any applicable IEP amendments or updates to that IEP. And then finally assessed whether all applicable services and accommodations as prescribed by that IEP were indeed completed and documented. And finally, those results are included here within this report. Moving into the first of our 2 high-risk observations is the development and delivery of ESC services or accommodations. And there are 3 key components to this observation, which kind of highlight the life cycle of that IEP development and administration. The first component is with regards to parent participation in the IEP development. Parents are indeed required to participate in the development of that IEP or affirmatively note that they have declined participation. In one of our 40 samples, we were unable to verify evidence of that parent participation in the IEP meeting, or confirmation that the parent had declined participation, representing an exception against the Florida Administrative Code Rule 6A 603028. The second component of this observation relates to the IEP service and accommodation delivery. You'll see a lot of detail within the body of this report. Page 15 highlights our detailed testing results. Our testing revealed that documentation was not available to substantiate the delivery of 354 out of the 467 services and accommodations reviewed within the scope of those 40 individualized education plans. The final component to this observation relates to the IEP progress reporting that is done at the end of the year or as report cards are delivered. So at that same cadence. Within our sample, there were 36 IEPs with which progress reporting would have been applicable. Of those 36, 11 did not complete or upload an applicable progress report to the state tracking system known as PEER. That is required by 34 CFR, Rule 300, and Florida Administrative Code, which defines the requirement of uploading those progress reporting. I'll pause for a moment to entertain any questions related to our observation. Similar to our previous reports, we do include our recommendation and response. Management's response does reflect our recommendation, and you'll note a tiered approach by which that management response has been broken out. There are a variety of individuals across the district intended or listed as a responsible party for each component of the management response listed on page 16. Any questions, comments, or concerns on observation 1?
Not seen from the members, but I do have one that I would just like to know. I think I appreciate management's feedback when it comes to specifically accommodations and the lack of proper reporting in that manner. Reading through the background and understanding the different items that could fall into accommodations, those can obviously be difficult to document. And if it's something as simple as verbal affirmation or simple things, items like those, making sure there's a process is important. So I appreciate understanding and seeing that need in detail there. I think the one that is more alarming is from the service side, the large and significant number of services that we don't have documentation that those services are being provided. And so when as we get the feedback from management, that's something in particular. I think the testing obviously is a small sample, and I think that probably raises the question that we need to look deeper beyond the initial testing sample to make sure that once this new process is in place, that it is addressing this effectively across the larger population.
Absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful transition into our second observation here with ESC delivery consistency and governance. In our review, we did note that there is an absence of clearly defined and consistently enforced framework for ESC service documentation and oversight. And that includes standardized procedures, training, tools, and additional monitoring mechanisms to evaluate their delivery. So we've broken this observation out into two components as well. The first of which is that uniform documentation expectations. We noted that there is currently no district-wide procedural governance or uniform documentation framework for how ESC staff, general education teachers, or related service providers should indeed evidence the provision of the services or accommodations provided. The second component of this observation relates more to governance, including centralized monitoring and quality assurance. The current ESC service delivery responsibilities, including the coordination, implementation, and monitoring of services or accommodations, is largely managed in a decentralized manner at the individual school level, rather through a regional coordinator or centralized district office. That presents some level of challenge. But in addition to that, we noted that there's not a robust centralized monitoring or quality assurance framework to complement that decentralized model. And that may impair the completeness of ESC service or accommodation delivery, or its ability to monitor the delivery of those services or accommodations. The final piece of this observation you'll note in that final paragraph is that the district lacks a defined set of key performance indicators by which it can monitor, quantify, and evaluate its ESC delivery performance. I'll pause for any applicable questions for observation 2 here.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I was curious, has there been any financial impact to the district based on these findings that you have?
So directly correlated with our audit, we didn't measure, the financial impact, but we are aware that there has been FTE reporting produced actually earlier this year that did have a financial impact. I believe it was just short of $1 million, and the calculation is based on two primary factors: a weighted FTE adjustment and a base student allocation calculation. So there was an impact in that report. It highlighted variances. It highlighted some similar observations that we did around documentation of ESC services, and that influenced that calculation. So to answer your question, there has been a financial impact related to the topic. Now, we didn't necessarily quantify that as part of our audit, but
And the Florida Auditor General audit was based off of 2023 data. Ours was based off 2024 data.
correct.
Okay, thank you. The other concern I have looking at this report, and we've talked about it with every other audit, with staff turnover and the like. It's great that the district appears to have a plan in place. Do we believe that that plan is something that can be accomplished?
Is that a question for us, Paul? I'm sorry.
Management
It's a
should respond.
question actually for staff.
Good.
Yeah, I think I can do my best. So we have new leadership in the academic space that supervises this particular area. They developed the management response. The new leadership that is in place, they established the deadlines, and they did do a lot of research. Even in the existing student information system, we have focus about the capabilities that were not being utilized to try to enhance and focus is one that a lot of districts use. So there are components within the focus system that can be leveraged that we simply did not use in that way. And so they do believe that these are realistic timelines and deadlines by which they should be held accountable, and identified the parties in it. So that was, they certainly, and they cooperated fully and completely with RSM's audit on this work, knowing full well that this is an area that we are, obviously it's a very much a struggle. For those who are unaware, it's our highest vacancy rate is in our ESC teaching classrooms. So as well as even with the itinerants, we're typically down on that as well, having to have outside providers. But the lack of the ability to put in some of these centralized functions to support this is critical work. And it's why ESC was one of the top of our internal recommendations of an area for deep review. And so I have to say, unfortunately, that the findings did not really surprise me as I've been here, and this is kind of what we expected to see, something along these lines. And we're very excited for the leadership team to have an opportunity to address them. We also hired a new executive director that came from a different state and actually has significant expertise in delivery of services across many districts. The particular individual has been a superintendent multiple times, many places, and just was a service provider for ESE services, serving over 100,000 students across 30 school districts in the state from which she came. So not only does she have that expertise of delivery at a massive scale, but across multiple different districts as well. And so I think we've enhanced both the internal capacity of the team as well as bringing in external people with these specific areas of expertise to help us as we adapt that element as well. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. And if I may follow up from RSM standpoint, I realize that your scope was fairly limited. Is this, would this have a recommendation towards next year's audit plan for consideration of enhanced testing in the ESE?
Well, it will be on deck for follow-up, definitely, you know, so we'll get with management, you know, their response is a tiered approach. So as we move into follow-up, you know, granted the date on here is an extended period, but we will get with management and kind of see where they are with that tiered approach to see if there will be some aspects that could be ready for testing and where they are.
And if I can add, one of the benefits of follow-up is we'll be able, after they put these changes in place, we'll be able to treat it similar to a cycle audit, but we'll be able to go back and see if those action plans have had an impact on retaining this type of documentation. So follow-up will address, you know, retesting and verifying in many ways that these things have been remediated.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ward.
Yeah, quick question for staff, please. Is ESE monitored by the state at all?
Yes, it is. And this is, again, an unfortunate thing, but when we had our most recent ESE audit, it actually came back with a lot of positive findings on this. And that's part of why we wanted RSM to dig into it even deeper, because we just felt that there were components of the ESE program that the state audit didn't capture. And we really wanted to have this more in depth. And so when you get into actual delivery of services down to the level of accommodations, as well as specific services called for in individual IEPs, that's the level of individual analysis that you saw. And the findings, unfortunately, are not, they're not positive. This is a huge opportunity for us in the district and a critical priority for our students. And so that is precisely why we wanted a more in-depth review of this and actually requested the board auditor to look in more in depth in this area beyond what the state did, because they completed their audit. And I don't want to get the year wrong, but it was 23 or 24, and it came back not with anything close to what you're seeing here. And that, I just felt like it was too surface level. And you know, obviously there's a lot of, this is very concerning just because it's not just the services, also an opportunity to lose revenue, whether through weight FTE losses, as well as even litigation. This is a very sensitive area as part of the importance of this audit committee being privy to this very sensitive information is these become exhibits in a lawsuit. And so it's very serious to us. And if we take it very serious, that's also why we invite all this internal scrutiny, because it is so important to get it right.
Yeah, I could appreciate that. And I'm just wondering, is there any impact on funding when you have a negative report?
Well, certainly it can make you more vulnerable to lawsuits. As soon as they see a report like this, it becomes an exhibit in the you know, anyone who didn't get their services and felt that there was a systemic issue or any of those things. And so that was part of our dialogue with RSM along the way. And the state is well aware of it because it's an area, obviously the ESE vacancy is the #1 vacancy in the state of Florida, not just Lee County. It is all over the state of Florida. And that just makes it more challenging. But that's why the burden falls on us to figure out how to make sure that our centralized systems and anything we can do can, at the best we possibly can, to overcome that challenge. That's also why we put an incentive. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we put in place a new incentive program to put significant resources to incentivize these vacancies, including our ESE self-contained resource classrooms, because it is so essential to have an actual certified person, not a substitute and not an out-of-field person who may lack some of the ability to deliver these things and understand the proper training and documentation that goes into it. So that was a credit to Dr. Carlin to really put and our board, quite frankly, our board took on and made a resolution so that over this summer we could try to fill that. And we've made much better progress this year in terms of getting a lot of these vacant classrooms filled far better than we have in prior years. So it's just, again, more progress to say about it, but there's still a lot of work to go on the centralized side of it. But some of these standard operating procedures are already under development. So some of this work has already begun based on some of the findings that we had prior to even the release of this report.
Thank you for your feedback.
Ms. Gianovelli with Dr. Carlin on deck.
Thank you. So thanks, Dr. Savage, because I was going to bring up the resolution so they are aware of our work trying to fill those really high needs classrooms that are the most difficult to fill. And doing that now at the, before school starts in August versus trying to do it mid-year was key. And it was a key element to the success of filling those classrooms. But you brought up the fact that we do have a lawsuit becomes a financial impact. And that, I get a lot of phone calls regarding parents asking for IEPs, asking for, for them to be reevaluated and stuff like that. And really my question is to Dr. Savage and Dr. Carlin for staff, and you may not have this answer, but have we identified the schools, because I feel like it becomes back to school level, have we identified the schools that are doing this well? And then trying to, share the wealth of that, because I know there's schools that do it well and there's schools that struggle. And so that would be a question that I would love to know that information, and that may come later. And then,
yeah, Ms. Giovanelli, it's a great question. And it is definitely a big part of our process was highlighting where it's working well. But I'll tell you that there is for us, we can't tolerate any variance across the schools. That's why there's a central aspect of this that is just so essential that I think has been absent, that we are really trying to strengthen. And I think you'll see that in the RSM report. I think it does an excellent job detailing that gap. That I don't know that the central apparatus here really took ownership of. I think they were very willing to kind of say it's on the individual schools. What I will tell you from the sampling was across many, many schools. And so this is an issue that is very significant across the organization. However, unsurprisingly, the schools that do a much better job are schools staffed with principals, administrative teams, and teachers in leadership roles that have significant, extensive understanding of the ESE requirements. And so part of the commitment we've had is to build that capacity, both at the central level as well as at the school-based level, to encourage that we have really high capacity individuals with high levels of training at all those schools, because having that internal expertise at each site enhances the quality of not just the delivery services, but the documentation, because there is that clear awareness. And that's something that we did find for the schools that were internally. That's something that we're more well aware of. But unfortunately, in the sampling, you'll see here that there are a lot of schools that were pulled across many schools, and the issues are significant. So that really is more evident of a central function that is not working properly. Again, I'm just trying to be very candid and very transparent. I'm not going to try to tell you that we're doing a great job and this is all good. That would just be not true. But I've also been that candid with RSM, and as well as with our own internal team as we develop on countermeasures to put better controls in place, because this is very critical work for us.
So, okay, thank you for that. So that leads me to where I realize and recognize it's a lot of paperwork for teachers, which they're lucky to get their, to have the time to teach our students. And so how do we make it easy for them? I know you're going to give them additional training, because I recognized that teachers are not aware of the ESE laws, and therefore they would, not do the things and give the services that are needed. And I will get that in phone calls and emails all the time. But my thought process, and I know Focus, y'all are going to work on Focus, helping that, but that's where you can get the parent to sign off on through Focus with updated, information on their student. But I think it needs to be very simple for the teachers as well as a parent. They need to be able to click and read and click through those and have easy objectives to pick on, and things like that. I know sometimes maybe they might have to have more of an explanation, but the process has to be simplified for the teachers to be able to do this very quickly, and getting the information to the parent, getting the information documented, and then the follow-up documentation needs to be a reminder email or reminder. I don't know, but that's why I feel that the support in the classroom, right down to the teacher able to do the paperwork, needs to be simplified, needs to be easy, but yet it needs to be, you know, very clear for the parent for understanding and making sure that we're giving those services, but by a click. I mean, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And Dr. Savage, just really
Please.
briefly to interrupt, because I
Yes,
had a question
please.
sort of along the same lines. In my understanding of management's response was that management felt confident that focus could be that documentation solution because teachers are actively in that. But
Yes.
that may have been what you alluded to with some of the modules or functionality that was not in play. Would that be a correct characterization?
Chair Sun, that is exactly right. It is centralized. Everyone has it. Their teachers are in it, and it really does speak to exactly. You bridge the gap perfectly with Ms. Giovanelli. That is a huge challenge, is not creating extra work for the teacher just to document what they are doing on a daily basis, but also to ensure we have ample evidence to demonstrate that in fact those services are being carried out. That is the challenging aspect of it, and it is a balancing act. And we had a lot of dialogue with RSM about that, because as you and Chairman Sun, it was you actually earlier who mentioned very much, and it was right on point, that some of these things, such as verbal reinforcement, a teacher may do that 10 to 20 times in a single lesson. Are they going to document that every moment they do it? And so we've even established parameters around that. That's part of what's in the handbook, is establishing those standards from a centralized standpoint and shining that best practice. It is occurring, how people are doing it properly, and then allowing that to become kind of the light of how folks can do this in a sustainable way that is truly respectful of the fact that they don't have all that extra time. So I don't want to belabor the point, because I understand we don't want to dig in the weeds on every issue as it, but I just wanted to make sure we highlighted for the audit committee that this is a very serious aspect of our organization, risk for us, and very, very important, and that we are taking it extremely seriously in our space on that, in terms of how we're approaching this with this as great speed as we can, but also doing it properly because we understand how significant it is for our day-to-day employees that have to carry out these processes.
And then really quick before I go to Dr. Carlin, Don has made me aware we are coming up on our 7 p.m. adjournment time. So if I could entertain a motion from one of the members, I would entertain something along the lines of to not adjourn past 8 p.m. To give us the space we need. I would appreciate that motion.
So moved.
Second.
So Don, I have the motion from Mr. Ward to allow us to extend the meeting to 8 p.m. to not exceed, and then a second from Mr. Swift. Dr. Carlin.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I just want to kind of tag into a couple of things that have been said. Number one, Ms. Giovanelli, I couldn't agree more. We do need to make it as easy as possible, but still make sure that it's comprehensive enough so that we do have appropriate documentation. So I really appreciate that. And that dovetails nicely into my next comment. And Dr. Savage highlighted this, several of you may know that I did incorporate a reorganization that impacted multiple positions at the district level. This is why we do what we do, why we take 5% out of our central office departments, and we say we have to reallocate them to our priorities. One of our priorities is increasing student achievement. And that means for all of our students, not just for our regular ed students, but for our students with disabilities. That's why I'm so excited that we have Dr. Colleen Tim, as Dr. Savage alluded to. She has been very, very involved in education throughout our country, most recently in Wisconsin, has a tremendous background in these areas. And so when we bring on executives, sometimes we take it on the chin a little bit, like, oh my gosh, you're bringing another executive on board. But when we have people that are extremely talented and experienced in these areas. And when we know they are our Achilles heel, I want to just reemphasize to you the importance of us being able to do that, and tip my hat to our school board that allows us the flexibility to be able to organize in a way that supports our students and our staff. So I just want to really emphasize that. And then I want to draw attention to the work that we have done as a team. When I first came into office, we had 230 teacher vacancies. Completely unacceptable, right? And we know we have a national teacher shortage and all of that. That's why you will hear every time I speak, I am relentless about filling teacher vacancies, because this district is number 9 out of the Big 10 in terms of student achievement, and it's not a mystery to me why. We have continued to experience high levels of teacher turnover and also high levels of teacher vacancies. And when you have teacher vacancies, including 43 ESE teachers currently that we do not have in classrooms ready to go for August 11th, that is a huge challenge for us. So I have challenged our HR team as well as our entire executive cabinet to think outside the box. And so they are working with principals to take our ESE paras and to help them develop them. If they have a bachelor's degree, great. We want to develop you into an ESE teacher. And we have principals that have already been doing that work. So we're trying to expand that. Why is that Grow Your Own program so important? Because of everything that Dr. Savage just said. High quality teachers who work with children with exceptionalities do a phenomenal job. They're not the ones that are reflected in this report. It's vacancies, it's newer teachers, it's folks that have come and gone, it's career changers that did not grow up in a college of ed like I did. I grew up in a college of ed at USF who emphasized this was very important. I learned in college how to do this documentation. We have a plethora of career changers. And so it really does come down to our central leadership working in partnership with our principals and making sure that we have a systematic approach to this work. It is essential, but it all goes back to having unfilled teacher vacancies, because when you don't have that, you have substitute teacher that comes in, they do their level best to manage that class, but there's so much information they don't have. And so it's really incumbent upon us at the central office. This work will be led by Dr. Colleen Tim and Dr. Nathan Shaker in partnership with their team to address this. So I just really appreciate and I want to tip my hat to Dr. Savage for pointing RSM in this direction so that we could uncover what his hunch was, and his hunch was right, that there are areas of concern. We want to go after them, and we want to make sure the next time RSM comes through that these are not findings, these are actually exemplars. These are areas that we have rectified, and we've actually gone over and above and done a great job. So I'm really excited about that, but it does support the work we've been doing. It supports the district priorities, and it supports the things that I ran on. And so I'm really, really proud of the work that I know is coming and look forward to great results. Thank you.
RSM, was there anything else on this audit that you guys had to discuss?
That was the conclusion of our presentation for this report.
And members, was there any other questions of RSM or management? Not seeing any. I do want to say that when we have findings that have high risk, I think this one, I appreciate the district pointing RSM in this direction. I think that speaks just to their understanding of where there was a weakness and opportunity to improve. But two, I know we don't have members of the public here today, but these are recorded, and large portions of this will be available in the public record. And I think it is important to note that the audit process this is not a got you game. The goal is to identify the areas where we need to improve, and as management has laid out, find a way to improve and do better, so that but next time as we go back in the follow-up reporting that we've addressed these, and you know, a year or two from now, and we're going back and evaluating some of these questions, we're not finding the severity of issues in these findings. And so I appreciate the district understanding the severity of this issue and the risks that it does pose, but also being willing to nudge or push RSM in the direction to look there and then be willing to address those. Don, I do know, I think our next audit deals with a sensitive nature, and as such, I believe there is a requirement to end recordings.
Okay. Give me just a
That
second.
is as much of a question as it is a statement. I don't know if Mr. Newland can speak to that.
I was
Or,
gonna ask Mr. Dodig if he's still.
Yeah, I'm
on.
here. I'm not aware of what it is. So,
Yeah, I think whether or not it's just to split, this would be the incident response. So there are certain exemptions related to safety and security that get into that piece. So I don't know if it makes the entire record that is created or i.e. recording exempt, it would not, any areas that are not permissible. So you get the difference there, Rob?
yeah, I do. I think we can just not record that section, but there's also, are there any members of the public here on this recording or in this meeting?
There are not, but I download this to a jump drive, take it to communications, and they put it on YouTube as a public record, so anybody can watch it.
Yeah, so I have a concern that we're in a public meeting and then we're not gonna make part of that public meeting public.
Well, that's why that's why I didn't know if you wanted to continue recording, and then when it goes to communications, they could segment this portion of the meeting, similar to like when we have our regular meetings and have to adjourn, they cut the tape or whatnot, so that if that meeting it is a full record that does in fact exist, but is not eligible for retrieval by like a public record request, so forth, but it still has a record that does in fact exist, so that if ever it were permissible to hand that over for that record, that it could. That's why I was suggesting, I don't know if you could do that, Rob, or if that makes, you know what I'm saying? This is just on exemptions. It falls under that.
What if someone logs on from the public right at this moment? I mean, we'd have to somehow kick them out. So.
Mr.
And I believe-
Dodig,
So how has the committee done it in the past, Dawn? Yeah.
usually in the past, Miss Dupuy Bruno would make a statement of the following audit is of a sensitive nature and therefore is exempt from the sunshine law. And then we stop recording. I know we've had a couple of them when we actually met in person, and we would stop the recording. The audit would be presented, and then when it's done and everything is, all final discussions are done, then we start the recording again, and you say we are resuming the recording of the audit committee meeting.
The recording is not a problem. The problem is that people can log on to here. So, and when you're in a person meeting, you could ask those people to leave the room. I mean, we're just gonna have to monitor, I guess, who comes in here.
So then
there's
Dawn,
a lobby, Rob.
Yeah,
there's a lobby that keeps them from coming in.
Yeah, I have to allow them in. If they
All right.
come in, if somebody pops in right now, I can say yes or no.
Okay.
So I could just
having
leave
said
them
that-
out there until we get done.
All right, so at this time, we'll go into what I would consider a private session to discuss a safety and security matter regarding the audits, and we'll stop the recording at this time. I see Miss Giovanelli has had her hand up. Is that?
Yeah, actually, before we go into this, I do have something for RSM regarding the fleet vehicle inventory management, and since they're moving on to something else, and I kind of wanted to, because it was something that the gentleman said earlier regarding I saw where and this is for staff, and I wanted to have a little more conversation from the audit committee and their input on this regarding it was really recommended that we not have those extra buses to cannibalize the parts and so forth. Yet, we don't keep track of it. So there's no tracking mechanism right now. And there's a discussion about PeopleSoft again, and their capabilities. But my question to RSM is when you make a recommendation to really not do something because it could be a problem, and then I read, and I'll just read it because I hope everybody read this, but management's response was district vehicles will be written off when they are no longer suitable to meet the district's operational goals. Transportation will continue to cannibalize the vehicle for parts. Procedures will be developed to document the parts being removed from each vehicle. But I mean, my concern is they kind of, management's response was we're going to continue doing what we do, and that's not the recommendation that I gathered from RSM. And what the gentleman said earlier regarding the buses and those costs, I would be curious what other districts do. Do they hold 100 extra buses that we don't need and use it to cannibalize parts? Because I know there's transportation issues, and this just leaves it wide open to continue having those transportation issues and then no accountability. So where do we, how do we hold things accountable? Yeah, we're going to get somebody new in there, and we have somebody new in there, but the response was from somebody that's new in there. And personally, I don't like the response because I don't think it's a good idea to leave parts wide open for anybody to cannibalize at their leisure, and there's no accountability. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Newland?
Sorry, I was on mute. I just want to interject real quick and respond to Ms. Giovanelli and the question about the vehicle fleet program. In fact, this was a big discussion even today, and we have been looking at we are auditing all of our yellow and white fleet vehicles currently. We have been going through them. We're going through the ones that, obviously the ones that are in shape that should be on the road, those that are not, that should not be on the road. And then at that point too, we do look at inventory. And then obviously the discussion is how do we dispose of those vehicles that are no longer in use. So I can tell you that we are taking a very close look at all of our fleet, the yellow fleet and white fleet. Moving forward, we are looking at other policies in the top 10 school districts, comparing those to what we currently want to do at our district here. So just so everybody knows, that is being we are taking a very detailed look at all of our fleet right now moving forward. With a plan in the future. So just want to bring that up as part of the discussion.
And just for the sake of everybody trying to follow along here, we've gone back to the follow-up testing, and this is specifically in relation to observation 1 in that testing. And so one of the things I would ask of RSM to make sure that we have a consistent understanding of their recommendation. I understand that the recommendation was that vehicles no longer suitable for service to be liquidated. But I did see a comment there about not in opposition to, but sort of a guideline or a recommendation that if they were to continue to part those vehicles before liquidation, that would be done in a manner where it would be inventoried and documented, because it seemed like the concern was in parts sitting in a lot and potentially going missing and not knowing. And I was curious, one, if that's a fair characterization of their recommendation, and then two, if they thought management's response was sufficient. Obviously, we've not gotten to follow-up testing because that item was slated for a completion in September. So follow-up testing will follow.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can answer that. I think it is a correct characterization. So just to be clear, in their updated management responses, they have clarified that they have disposed of 100 of those vehicles by which they were determined to not be suitable, whether that was due to safety concerns or whether they just no longer felt a need to cannibalize those buses any longer. They did acknowledge that if they were going to choose to cannibalize any of those buses before being disposed of, that they would bring those parts into the inventory before disposing them. So if there's any value to be retained, they will be bringing those into inventory, which aligns with the recommendation that we had. Now, we haven't had an opportunity to test that right yet because the estimated completion date hasn't passed. But as of now, their updated management response aligns with our initial recommendation.
And then testing would involve a follow-up to ensure that any, we'll call, I think, cannibalized parts is the language here, is documented in inventory.
Correct. We would be verifying that items that were pulled or cannibalized from the buses were brought into inventory, and then those parts are being accurately tracked and recorded, of course.
Ms. Giovanelli, want to make sure that addressed your question and concern there on that issue.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Chief Newland, on that, because I appreciate, I just, my vision was that the district was being a junkyard. So thank you.
All right.
And if I could real quick, before we go into a closed session portion, we lost our subject matter professional due to timing this evening outside of his control. So Weiss and I can go over the report with you in layman terms, or we can go have them join us at the next audit committee meeting to go into the subject matter professional terms of the results of the incident response. I'll leave it up to you.
One of the things I would ask RSM, will that in any way deliver or delay the delivery of the report to the board?
I don't think so. So what will happen is we'll just deliver it to the board before we will deliver it to you.
All right, then I would entertain discussion from committee members on their view on that. I know that is a departure from our standard process, but being that this one has to deal with security, I want to make sure if is a question, it's not, or an issue that the board needs to be aware of, it's not delayed. Mr. Cohen.
Yes. I believe even though the subject matter expert is not available, I would still like to hear the results of their findings.
And I'd like to chime in on one thing, because we're having quarterly meetings and we're trying to cram so much into these quarterly meetings that we're always exceeding our 1.5 hour cutoff. I'd just like to also entertain a motion of maybe doing this every 2 months, something like that. I don't want to add more complexity and waste more time, but there's a lot of stuff here that probably should not be glossed over. So to further Mr. Cohen's point, yeah, this is important. I don't mind hearing a layman's term aspect to it, but it does seem like we cover a ton of ground that's not necessarily contentious. There's a lot of questions, so it takes a long time. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Swank. And I would say, I think one of the changes that we've already discussed, I don't think there needs to be any formal action to do this. I think this is just something that RSM will be doing. But by bringing follow-up reporting to us at a quarterly basis instead of trying to annualize that, I think if you were to go back and look at the timestamp of the discussion, the overwhelming majority of our discussion was on that. But then, Mr. Swank, if that is a continued issue with the updated format, then the members are more than welcome to entertain a more frequent meeting cadence.
Fair enough. Good point.
Ms. Giovanelli?
On that real quick, I think that might be policy, the reason why it's quarterly.
So
So,
it's at a minimum a quarterly basis, so they can meet more often.
okay, thank you. I wanted clarity on that. I was just going to ask that.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so and so y'all might have to just make that recommendation, and I understand, believe me. Thank you.
All right. Then, Don, at this point, I think we will need to stop the recording. I don't know if we need the legal disclaimer again. I'll leave that to.
Sure. At this point in the meeting, the committee is going to discuss a safety and security measure, which is exempt on the Public Records Act. I'm sorry, under the Public Meetings Act, from public disclosure. So we'll pause the recording at this point.
Give me just a second. It's thinking about it. Okay, we're recording again.
Okay, so at this point, the public portion of the audit committee meeting of July 9th, 2025 has resumed.
And
I'm
then-
gonna put it, I'm sorry, I'm gonna put a timestamp on that of 7/22.
Perfect.
And then just looking at our agenda, we've reached the point in the agenda where RSM has completed all of their presentation. So I will just open it up to the members. Are there any questions of RSM? Of course, keeping in mind that the last subject we don't want to go into, but are there any questions of RSM that we would like to have them go over or ask before we dismiss them, as we've already kept them a little over this evening?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Forbes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that this is an appropriate question for them, but if it isn't, then we'll wait till we move on and then we can talk about it. These 250 school buses. They're cannibalizing some of them to keep the other buses running. So there's a value that comes off the bus that saves the school board money, but also a bus that's been cannibalized is not worth what it was before it was cannibalized. Has anybody done any kind of a financial analysis to determine what's best for the district financially? And even if it comes out that cannibalization is okay, I think we ought to limit, like out of those 250 buses, okay, we'll set aside, I'm just using an arbitrary number, 20 buses to cannibalize, and the rest of them are going to get sold. Because the longer they sit there, the less they're worth, and the more you cannibalize them, the less they're worth. And that's my thought for whatever it's worth. But I do think that we need to meet more often until we get through some of these big things, because otherwise we're either not going to get it discussed or we're going to have to limit discussion on other things, and you don't want to do that. That's my point. So.
All right. RSM, I'll let you take a stab at that. And then I saw Mr. Cohen and Mr. Newland both chime in here.
Yes, I'd say from our perspective in the original report, Fred, so I'm excited that you'll get an opportunity to read the report. We do highlight, we focus very much on process and controls. So when we evaluated it, I think the concern for us was that not necessarily that they were cannibalizing. It was that when they were cannibalizing, they weren't bringing those parts into inventory, right? And more importantly, that they weren't writing off those buses prior to cannibalizing them. So I think our recommendation was more to highlight that if there are buses that are not operational for whatever reason, whether that's safety concerns or whether they just don't meet the needs of the district, that those be disposed of and that the parts be removed and brought into inventory so that they could be tracked to reduce, of course, any risk of fraud. And so when we consider the decisions that are made based on the bus inventory, such as whether new buses should be purchased, that was what we highlighted in our report, was that these numbers are inflated, right? There isn't, in fact, 1,000 buses that are operational. There's much less. So that's what our report focused on. I think I would defer to Dave and his team if they've done any further analysis from a financial perspective. But from our perspective, we focus on the controls.
So, Mr. Newland, I'll go to you because I assume they'll be on this.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we are really taking they've been really working very hard on looking at all the yellow fleet, white fleet. The question on inventory, they've been working on, doing the inventory. So that's the other part of the question I know RSM brought up as well. Again, as I mentioned before too, is you're looking at look at the buses or the white fleet, either one of those, what vehicles should be on the road, at what point should they be taken off the road. So we are taking a very detailed look at all this whole process, and the process I think is very important. Policies. We are looking at the top 10 school districts as well to see what their process is. So I can just tell you that we are really going through this very detailed from the very start of the. We look at the yellow fleet. inventory, and then how are they just properly disposed of. So I can't give you any financial figures, but I can tell you that that this has been an ongoing conversation. They've been working very diligently going through all the inventory as we move forward.
All right. Mr. Forbes,
Yes.
does that answer your questions?
Yeah, I think it maybe at the next meeting or maybe even a memo coming out. What's the average life expectancy of a school bus in Lee County for a board of education? Is it 5 years, 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever? That's number one. Number two, you may find that you're better off to jettison a bus when it's still got some miles left on it, because we'll get a bigger value out of it and you will have less maintenance on it. Just a couple things I think. Now you may be looking at that because I'm the new kid on the block, but if you're not, it should be.
One of the things I'll say is these observations are all due to start testing. I shouldn't say all, but it looks like most are due earliest in September, and then it would progress throughout the year. So maybe we can ask Mr. Newland as we get to that testing stage, as you guys are completing that research, that as you get some of those details and we come back and we're looking at these observations and follow up, that may be another additional item that we discuss.
Yeah, I'll write up more formal what I just asked and explain why it's important and send it to the chairman. He can get it to you.
And I've taken notes too on my end, so we'll make sure we'll have that answer for you next time.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I think we're in a position kind of where we're doing a crossover. Gibson had been retained years ago through the Finance Advisory Committee, and obviously the school board is the one who signed the contract and determined some concerns with our transportation. School board took a lot of that under advisement. I think where RSM's responsibility is financial operational compliance controls. I think we've now crossed over that line into the financial impact of cannibalizing versus selling inventory. And I think RSM has done their yeoman's task of indicating where the control breakdowns are in the current process. I think we have to leave it up to staff and the board to make that determination as to what to do with the vehicles, when to dispose of them, when to cannibalize them, life expectancies, et cetera. I think that goes a little bit beyond the audit committee's charter.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Giovanelli?
Well, and to add to that, they also, RSM made a great point that policies need to reflect, or procedures need to reflect that. So this is something that the board needs to have a conversation about. And I know RSM is, I think, going to want, since they've, reported this to the audit committee, now it goes to the board. And I think that conversation needs to happen regarding our policies guiding our procedures that are happening at, regarding the fleet and cannibalizing and so forth, and what the expectation and policy should be. I don't think that we're governing that. That's where I think that there's an issue, my opinion. And so I think if this audit committee wants to make a recommendation or, something to that effect, that might help guide the board a little bit more. At least where, it would make a determination of where the audit committee stands regarding what they'd like to see. Because this is, really the board works for this committee, in my opinion. So, they need guidance and direction, what exactly, just because what the RSM says doesn't mean things happen. As we can see, some of these things are still in continue and no actions taken place. Some of these findings were old, and we still have some now lingering that are old, and that is a concern to me. So the more information the audit committee gives and guidance, I think is important, because that's what your job is. For me, that my opinion is your job is to you know, you're our community that we serve. So, you know, what do you want to see? This is your tax dollars as well. That's why y'all are key and very important in guiding the board. Does that make sense?
It does. Dr. Carlin, I see your hand raised.
Yes, sir. And thank you very much, Ms. Giovanelli. We're always open to input, certainly from the audit committee. I will just share with you, I heard Mr. Newland also say that they're taking that back, and we're happy to do some work to make sure that what does our policy say? How are we complying? And then beyond that, what are best in class doing, right? We always know that there's other districts out there that are doing amazing work. And so one other thing I would ask Mr. Newland to do is, to take a look at not only our policy, but let's take a look at what some other districts are doing, some of the best in the state in terms of this. So that's certainly some homework for staff to participate in. I just want to make a note of that we are taking notes of the conversation and would be happy to look into what best in class are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments for RSM at this point, I'll say speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, we have we'd like to talk about the fiscal year 26 audit plan. We're prepared. We've been, we keep a tally of topics, et cetera, as we're ongoing online real time. So it's 3 topics that come to mind for us for the fiscal year 26 plan.
Just
Budgeting.
briefly, Mr. Sund, I think this is number 10 on the agenda, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's fine to take it out of order so they could be let go.
So we were thinking budgeting. It was on our top 10 that we previously presented. And we do think it's a good time to include that into the audit plan, the budgeting process. We had a lot of discussion today about contract compliance, right? And we feel that's still on our radar as well. So the contract compliance, we were looking at the contracting process and the overall district procedures. Now we want to dive more into contract administration. So yes, the district's working on trying to identify a system, trying to get more controls in place from an overall district-wide perspective. But we want to make sure that we're keeping the finger on the pulse and the eyes on the actual administration of the contracts. What is the district paying for, the goods and services? Are they receiving what they're paying for? Is it in line with the contract terms, et cetera? So that would be our second related topic. And again, we had a lot of conversation around that today as well. And then 3, we always like to include an IT related topic within our audit plans. It makes it well-rounded. So we were thinking sensitive data. Weiss, do you want to kind of go over a little bit of overview on that one?
Yeah, so sensitive data protection is a common audit we do. We haven't had an opportunity to look in this specific area as it relates to IT. So this is the sensitive data protection is actually the process for managing access, encryption, and the monitoring of the actual sensitive data that exists. So the types of systems that would be in play from an evaluation perspective would be obviously the student information system, Focus, and the ERP system that are in place. So it's really going to focus on data protection standards, the controls that might be in place, and of course the technology that's employed in place to protect the sensitive information that exists within the district. So obviously a highly sensitive topic, but an area we haven't had an opportunity to look at, and an area that we could provide some level of comfort around, given the sensitivity of the information.
I'd like to chime in on something regarding the future in auditing. I just from a personal point of view, I like the administration. I like the constituency of the board right now. And I think, quite to be blunt, I basically feel like I've been butting heads with the school district for many years now. But I have a glaring, and so from the contract review perspective, I have a glaring issue, which is a proposed facility. It's called NNN. It's a high school in Tuckahoe Road. This facility is, in my opinion, indefensible. And you've got some very sophisticated people that live in a rural area that is 7 miles from this where the students will be served. This is supposed to be essentially the east side of the county. They have two locations they could utilize. One is in Lehigh Acres that has infrastructure. One is in Alva that doesn't have infrastructure. There are no sidewalks there. So these kids can't even walk the 7 miles or ride their bike. They're going to have to be bused, which we've already discussed as the problem. So that's going to exacerbate the situation. There would have to be sewer. Roads would have to be modified. Power would have to be modified. There are permitted gun ranges nearby. And then it's just, I guess, to further the point, there was Benita Springs High School. There was the Estero High School. There was the cost overrun for Riverdale. So like this guaranteed maximum price, just kind of protocols that were in place so these errors wouldn't occur again. And I mean, I've been kind of checked out, so I just had some people filling me in on this stuff, but evidently, there's supposed to be a phase 1 and a phase 2 process regarding guaranteed minimum price to approve full funding for schools. And that process was bypassed in the case of school NNN. So we're just seeing the same thing over and over again. And so serving on the audit committee and probably serving on RSM gets frustrating. So we're determining in what's truly galling, I guess, is there's a site in Lehigh Acres that has infrastructure. And so I guess my final point is, I don't know if this is staff, like a root cause analysis. Is this staff coming up with these ideas? Because it's like defending the indefensible. And I mean, this is to the point where I've been told as of June 12th, there's a civil rights lawsuit that's been filed over this. So like none of it makes sense, but it's like heels are dug in. And it pains me to see the district or the board making a obviously bad decision. I don't know if there's just an inability to pivot. It's just too much institutional momentum going in one direction that they can't pivot given new information. And I mean, one of the reasons I made some outreach, and one of the interesting reasons I was given that they were going forward was that Alva had asked for this school to be built. That was in 2015. It was 10 years ago. So, I mean, and a lot of stuff, which I'm not going to bore anyone with, has occurred since then. But we discussed, I think, at the last meeting, the lack of real community involvement, like assessing where the community is on these things. This is a perfect example. You got a unified group of Lehigh Acres residents who have all this, means the highest student generation rate in all of Lee County is Lehigh Acres. And we're going to put a school in a rural area 7 miles away from Lehigh. It doesn't make sense. So I would like to be able to see some audit in whatever the capacity is for contract or decision making, like capital planning. I mean, I'm not sure how we're going to actually classify it, but we can't have the Benita School, the Estero School, the Riverdale School, and now this potential NNN school that are just collectively indefensible, repeating again and again and again. And it gets very frustrating trying to raise. I'm trying to help and I'm getting a stiff arm. And I'm an advocate of the district at this point. So there's other people that are, feeling like how I felt 5 or 6 years ago. But again, I mean, I'll repeat myself. I feel good about the leadership now. I feel good about the constituency of the board. But what's just incomprehensible to me is how this can still even be considered when you look at it factually, when you actually weigh pros and cons, when you have a viable alternative within Lehigh Acres. I can't get why the heels are dug in. So I would love, just for the sake of the future school district performance, and RSM, you guys come up with ideas, fellow board members, leadership. I don't know where we classify this, but it's just, it galls me because I feel like you're going to have essentially all the hard work being done is going to be negated by a bunch of very obvious negative publicity for this. So I don't want the school district to go backwards, and I don't think they really grasp the severity of the situation here. and the incredibly bad optics this poses. So that's my 5 cents.
Okay.
Dr. Savage, I see you there, and I do want to get a chance to go to you, but one thing I do want to ask RSM,
Where we go.
along the lines of some of these
Yeah.
future plannings, and Ms. Giova, let's see, I can't mute her. One of the things I would ask is,
Sorry.
of the items that Mr. Swank discussed, do you see an area or a topic within that? Because I do also understand, I think this is what Dr. Savage may get to. I think some of what is discussed here is policy, board policy, which is going to be left up to the board members to decide, rightly or wrongly, how we view it. So I want to make sure with sort of the things that he outlined, if you had any questions on to better gauge that.
I just wanted to highlight real quick the that this is an area that Mr. Schwank raised that we also raised that we know has significant risk to it, both perceptual, the community, as well as financial risk. I mean, you name it. It's when you're talking building $100 million schools. Where you build them? Why are you building them? Do they need them here? All those considerations, and that was folded into the specific need for capital planning and to have that reviewed, because that's really what that talks about is where do you build, when are you renovating, when are you decommissioning a building, when are you building a brand new construction, how are you doing that whole process and all the resources that go with it, as well as that aspect of it and that process that governs it, the process of analysis, the process of transparency of the records. How did you arrive at those decisions? How are things being made, right? So that whole idea was captured under the idea of capital planning, because that's really where it lives in our shape, in our world is planning kind of takes that forefront, their engagement, not just in the school base, but in the municipal planning, the idea of where do you need schools, how are those enrollments changing over time, how are those facilities holding up over their 50-year plan life cycle, what are the procedures that are in place in the district to kind of elevate those things and to get ahead of them, and then also how do you control it in price, as well as an execution of those plans. And so RSM conducted an audit of the capital planning, and that was designed to elevate some of those issues. Some of them did come back, I believe, with high-risk findings, but going off of memory. But it was fairly recent this year, actually, because we recognized that it was still pretty significant in light of things like Riverdale and so forth that were coming up. Just to highlight a lot of those different aspects, as well as things like NNN, as well as recent school projects. So that's why it was elevated by management, as well as I think the board, being in response to kind of these, not just community concerns, but even just internal through leadership changes when a new superintendent comes in and that disruption that happens in that process. So all those things were really folded under that umbrella. So I just kind of want to elevate that for the audit committee in case that was happening. And then just anything that RSM would want to add, because obviously they conducted the more recent audit of that piece, which was, I think, just months ago that you may have completed that. I just wanted to elevate that for the audit committee in case you had some dialogue, because I don't think I was in whatever meeting y'all may have had, but just wanted to elevate that for the audit committee's group awareness, as well as RSM to give voice to if they wanted to dialogue about that.
That is correct, and we were actually pulling up that report as well. So yes, Mr. Sand, you had the question of where would we classify that into? That would be part of capital planning as well. And so the objective of that audit, we took it from looking at the tracking, recording, managing, and monitoring the capital planning processes are effectively designed to mitigate risk and align with organizational objectives. I'm sorry, what?
No, I was just going to highlight.
Oh. There were three, we had three observations. This was reported back in March of 2025, so it's not part of this follow-up because they were not ready for follow-up as of yet. But there were three observations related to the capital planning process. And just a history, one had to do with capital project documentation and approvals of that documentation, the standard operating procedures, and the documentation of CIP project priority. So, Mr. Swank, I think maybe some of your concerns is kind of underlying within some of the things that maybe we identified as well within that audit. Anything you want to add?
One thing to chime in here, just so I can kind of focus where, and this is just my theory, because this really bothers me, because I really do feel like the district's going in the right direction. And everybody said this has been the theme of the night, change of leadership, turnover. I mean, so you have different superintendents, you have different board members, but you're having the same outcome. And so the only thing I could think is that is it the same staff making the same decisions? Like, is that, the board members have a lot to do, the administration has a lot to do. they're relying on staff to make good decisions for them. And that's the only theory I can come up with, is that there's a core group of people that have been consistently there making bad decisions. So my only recommendation is basically like, where do these decisions or recommendations originate from? Is this a board members coming up with this idea? Is it staff? What part of the staff, if so? Because if if you got the same staff making decisions from Estero all the way up to this NNN, that should be analyzed, because then you're probably going to be able to eliminate a lot of the headache that the district has to go through from improper allocation of funds and or grossly being over budget. When you're not, I mean, a huge amount of the overrun for Riverdale was the very minor infrastructure that had to be done for Riverdale. It pales in comparison to what would have to be done at NNN. And so, I don't think the numbers reflect the reality of the situation. So that's just to clarify, it's my hope that that is where the issue lies. So I just want to say specifically, I think that area specifically needs to be eyeballed.
As an architect and engineer, I'd like to put some comments on what you just said. Number one, if the staff is still the same, that's a problem. Number two, if the architect is the same guy that overran these projects, that's a problem. If the contractors that put a roof on a building and it collapsed the building, they didn't have an architect or engineer look at it. If he's still getting roofing contracts with what we paid for that roof in the first place per square foot, and then had to have the building put back together, those are big problems. They need to be looked at. I'm an architect and engineer. I know what I'm talking about. I ran $2 billion worth of budgets. There's a big problem here. It needs to be fixed. I agree with everything you said.
Mr. Swank, do you have the copy of the capital planning audit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Don, is that something we can make sure that's distributed? Because I think there's a lot of questions there. And I think we're going to need to take a look at that to decide, are some of the issues that Mr. Swank has raised, are they addressed in that, or is that something that we do need to come back and look at and say that needs to be still on the quote unquote hit list of risks or concerns that RSM should be evaluating and looking at?
Chair, can I add one more comment? Briefly?
Yes.
I do think, Butch, that our report will provide, I would want to say, a level of comfort, but I think what you'll find is that it's highlighting many of the concerns that you've raised. For example, the one of the high risk findings that we talk about are the types of documentation that we would expect to accompany these types of projects. So, for example, we highlight the documents that were unable to be provided as part of our sample selection as part of the capital planning audit were things like a community engagement plan, were things like documented evidence of key stakeholder approvals prior to proceeding with project planning and presentation to the board. So we do highlight many of the things that you're describing as opportunities, things that management have committed to correcting and remediating as part of their action items. So these are the types of action items we will be going back through our follow-up testing and validating are in place and retesting. Just want to give you some comfort that we did highlight some of the concerns that you're expressing in that report. So we want to make sure you get that report.
Well, if you do go back, like another stakeholder besides the community that seems to not be being listened to, the Board of County Commission and the MPO, Municipal Planning Organization, evidently have no plans to provide infrastructure in this area. In fact, this area of the county is not currently included in a franchise zone for sewer or water. So that would be something that the school district would have to take on the chin. And as I said before, if you go out there and eyeball the place, and then you go to Riverdale, and then you look at what the numbers are to fix from an infrastructure perspective, Riverdale versus a barren, it's basically a scrub jay habitat. There's nothing there. There's no sidewalks. There's nothing. So it's just frustrating. I mean, I don't like having to repeat. I don't like having to address a problem and then you have to address it months or years later. Like, I just want to find a way to get it fixed. So, and so that's a stakeholder perhaps that planning, whoever it is, should incorporate. Is this something that, if we're going to have to build it here, who's going to be a partner to help offset the cost of this stuff? Because right now there's no partner.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I want to raise another point that Mr. Swank, and I agree with very much everything that he has said. I serve on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for the county. There is a representative from the school district who also attends those meetings. Based on what Mr. Swank is bringing forward, nothing has been brought forward to that advisory committee, to the county commissioners, relating to the establishment of that school, the impact that that school have on bicycle and pedestrian activity, needs for sidewalks, safety, etc. So I'm still seeing that breakdown. I think I lost my composure several meetings ago with the Rivervale audit. I also saw the Estero High School, the debacle that was when I chaired the Finance Advisory Committee. I don't believe that it's staff. I think the process is broken. And I think the process needs to be reassessed. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're doomed to fail over and over again, no matter who you put in charge. So it's a process breakdown. That's not something I believe that RSM is qualified to be doing. That is something that I believe a appropriate consulting firm would be more in line to evaluate. And I think that's something before the school district goes over budget yet again on yet another school, it would be money well spent to bring in a consulting firm. That's a recommendation I'm making. The committee obviously has the ability to make a recommendation one way or the other to the school board, but I'm saying it in the public forum.
And Mr. Cohen, are you wanting that to be something that the committee would look at formalizing, or are you satisfied just making that comment on the record?
Based on the time right now, I would rather see us put something more formalized to the board as a valid recommendation from this committee. We do have Ms. Giovanelli, who's present here. We have the superintendent who's present here. I think they've heard from several members of this committee and have heard our concerns. And to just throw out an arbitrary recommendation to the school board, I don't know if that's going to be beneficial. I think we have to put a little bit of thought behind it. And I'm not saying that Mr. Swank is not, because there's quite a bit of detail to what he presented. But I think we have to make a determination. Is it something that we would see our partnership with RSM being a component to this? Is it something where we need to make a recommendation that a third party be brought in from a consulting standpoint? And normally that recommendation would come from either construction advisory or finance advisory, but my understanding is those committees no longer exist. So that's why I'm kind of bringing it forward into this venue.
I know we're at times, I just, because obviously there's a lot that has been said. I know that the RSM did conduct the capital planning, which really does speak to a lot of what the comments related to. And I think that because I just would ask that you kind of at least honor their aspect of their, what they put forward. There was a management response that was issued. There are timelines on that piece. I think that's an opportunity. What I can do is just because we heard a lot of dialogue around this piece, but I don't know if everyone's taking the time to read their findings and kind of what those were, just make sure we're all kind of familiar with the work that was done to analyze exactly the things you talked about, which really does begin the planning process, as well as the decision-making, all those things. There's a lot of it in there. Very little that's not, I think, addressed in some way, but to try to add more to it, we could always, we could work with our staff to try to put a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of, describing kind of where they're at. Just give you a quick summary. We had 3 planning directors over that time period at least, so it's not the same people. There's significant turnover in that group. in terms of that aspect of it. There is required engagement with the county through concurrency to keep, everyone kind of aware of what's going on. So there's just so much complexity to what you all talked about that I just can't possibly summarize it in a couple minutes. And so just we'll work on putting together some more information. But a great starting point is just the 21 pages that RSM did put together, complete with their findings independently, as well as management responses with time parameters. Well, and those things would be great to review. Certainly could be topic that you all could bring up and talk about in your next RSM meeting after everyone's had a chance to review those findings. So if there's still things that you'd want to go deeper on, but then what we could do is provide more insight that we could give to kind of supplement beyond what's there. Just, there are, of course, meetings where we've had to talk about these things, but we could try to focus on the narrowness of what you talked about today and try to get some of our staff people to talk through what those different considerations are. And I'll do my best to try to get that before your next audit committee meeting for you all.
All right. So as we sit here 2 minutes shy of 8 p.m., I'm not going to try to rush an answer to RSM on their fiscal year 2026. So I will work with Dawn to schedule a meeting at as quickly as we can get back on the books so we can get a response to them, because I know that's something that they do need to get going there. And then Mr. Cohen and Mr. Swank, what I will do is we'll work with Don to make sure we get the capital planning documentation in front of everybody so that we can have that. And then we'll agenda a larger discussion around that. We had the Riverdale audit finding, and that could be all compiled into a larger recommendation, potentially of looking at outside consulting if the body thought necessary, to make sure that before the district were to move forward, they're doing so on solid footing. Ms. Giovanelli.
And I'm going to end here as well. Thank you, Dr. Savage. And I do think they need that report. Also, I just want to actually just say a couple things regarding the auditor, the board auditor. We are supposed to have another conversation on the 29th, the board regarding that. And if any new applicants have came in, they had kept that open through, I'm not sure how much, I think maybe through even July, to see if we could get some more applicants to have a good pool. Obviously, with the time delay, we have lost applicants as well, for whatever reason. So I just wanted to let the audit committee know that. Number two, we just for Mr. Swank, we need schools and we need them in the East Zone. And God only gave so much land, and that is the land that the district has owned for a long time.
Ma'am, you own land that's in Lehigh Acres that has all of the infrastructure.
And that land is also once you see the capital plan, you'll understand where that's already planned for use as well. And
do you know how much it's going to cost to build 7 miles of sidewalks?
Mr. Swank,
I think there's a lot of things that are not included.
I just think you need to see the report, and then I think, and you'll have a better idea, because the need is great. We have too many students in the East Zone and not enough schools.
We got a 71 student generation rate in Lehigh Acres. We have the most students out of this entire place. Having 3,000 high school students have to traverse on a bus, which we've already discussed as a problem, 7 miles, and not letting them have a neighborhood high school is incomprehensible to me.
We already bus students to Alva. We bus students regardless. So the busing is going to happen. We're not going to be able to eliminate that. So because the county is very large. So I just think you need to look at the reports because you don't have all the information. I'm just going to tell you don't have all the information. And I think once you get the information and then you're able to ask the questions, you'll have a better understanding. That's really all I wanted to say. I think you just really need to see the information. The growth is going east. So, and that's the land we have. I'm not sure what else. Our options are very slim, unfortunately. And that's,
No, they're not. You have a perfectly viable location right now.
Mr. Swank, as I've,
Yeah, I'll zip it. Sorry, guys.
yeah, I don't want to limit the conversation. I said we'll agenda this and we'll dive into it where we can give it its due time. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, I just want to make sure before Ms. Giovanelli has to leave the meeting. And I realize this is going a little bit out of turn, but she brought it up about the board internal auditor. This committee was charged close to 2 years ago with writing a job description for that position. Human Resources, for whatever reason, did not take any of our recommendation under advisement, put out the original version of the job description, and now we have been removed from all discussion relating to that key position that will work in lockstep with the audit committee, not reporting to, but there has to be some kind of coexistence. And I am very disappointed in the school board that they have removed their quote unquote appointed experts in audit, risk, and compliance from that equation and are leaving a document that leaves a lot to be desired. Secondly, I am extremely frustrated. I was forced at the last board meeting, to present as a member of the public an opinion as to where this audit committee has performed their duties and responsibilities. And I was given a whopping 3 minutes and unfortunately was not able to get to the crux of what I wanted to present. It was basically put into the public record of the meeting where nobody will ever hear the thoughts and concerns of this committee, the accomplishments of this committee, and the like. So I am extremely disappointed in the school board. I tried to do every workaround utilizing the superintendent, got no traction there. I utilized Dave Newland. He did the best of his ability to try to gain me access, none of which occurred. And in all bluntness, I was on the cusp of whether I was resigning from this committee tonight because my frustration has really boiled over. I am hoping that we could turn a new leaf, but that remains to be seen. I did not take the vice chair role without giving it some thought, but things have to change. And I'm going to say something that I wanted to say at the school board meeting, and it got lost because the school board was packing up to leave at that moment. I want to make sure that Mr. Sund is given the respect that I don't feel I was given as chair for the past 2 years from this school board. And I think that has to change.
Can I just jump in on Mr. Cohen's? He everything he said is actually true. He did attempt to do all those things and was circumvented. So at this point, I would have each of you, you're all appointed by a school board member. I would have you reach out to each of who appointed you. And even if they're no longer there, then whoever's sitting in that seat now, because it may have changed. And I think that because I believe that we work for you. So your opinions matter and for me, and I'm going to speak for me as Melissa Giovanelli. So the only way is to have the same voice, but you've got to start with your board members because for some reason, I don't understand where it changed and why. I tried to fight to I value the audit committee, and so I wanted to make sure your voice was heard, but I was outnumbered. So when I had the discussion with them, so I think you need to start with your board member that appointed you, and then we figure out where to go from there. As this audit committee, and then I think maybe even solicit other board members after you've spoken to the one, and you got to be careful. You don't want a daisy chain or anything like that, but you have to see where their mind was or the mindset of why they don't want to involve the audit committee, which is board policy as well. So, and that's really important. So I think evaluate that and have another conversation at your next meeting. Circle back around and to address even what Mr. Swank was wanting to talk about. So I think because, like I said, I do value this committee. Thank you.
So at this point, we have surpassed our time limit. As I've said, I will work with Don. We will find a time to get back on. RSM, do you have a timeline or a deadline that you are looking for our recommendation by to make sure your presentation to the board is in a timely manner?
Well, we're presenting to the board August 5th. So we have to submit our items a week in advance. So as soon as possible, because we're prepared to write up the scopes, for those 3 items. And the thing about it's a proposed internal audit plan. So if we decide that changes should be made, that's why we call it proposed. It's not a final document. If there needs to be, like I said, changes to it, but at least this way, as we're in July now, so we're at the beginning of fiscal year 26. So this way we can at least get started on something, right? Get started on a project, started on planning, etc. But if we need to defer one that was decided on and change it out for something else that comes into play, that can happen as well.
So then if the board or if the committee would indulge me, I know contracting has been something that has been a constant item of conversation. It's been something that was discussed significantly in our follow-up here. Is that a subject matter that this committee would be supportive of moving forward with, so we could put that at the front of our list, so if there were to be changes, they can at least begin that work on a subject that we think is valuable and worthy of the time of with the district's resources, but also RSM's time to investigate.
Yeah, it really should be. And also, we need to be able to look at change orders and all that on some of the big projects that have a lot of change orders, because you may be paying a fee to the architect to correct a mistake he or she made. And that's not a good thing.
So Mr. Forbes, we're talking here specifically about contract administration. This is more in lines of the district is getting what we have paid for as an agreement in the document. The item that you're talking about of change orders, those other issues, I think that will fall under that capital planning. That discussion we'll have at our next meeting. Absolutely. I'll add that there. Mr. Cohen.
Good.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Sund. I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the school board to consider the performance of a contract administration audit. At least it gets RSM going, and then at our next meeting, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we can bring forward a couple more audit recommendations.
And if I could, can we add on quarterly follow-up? That way we can get started on our quarterly follow-up as well.
I will accept that as an amendment to my motion.
So Mr. Cohen has a motion for starting on contracting administration and quarterly follow-up. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Severson. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none. Don will show that adopted unanimously. All right. Obviously, there are still a lot of things to discuss. Unfortunately, we did not solve all the world's problems tonight. I don't think we'll get them all done at the next scheduled meeting either. But I have a long list of items, and I would encourage board members, if there are other items that you want to make sure that we get on the docket to be discussed. Obviously, we'll be cognizant of sunshine. Please send those to Don, and Don will make sure that they get to me so we can get those on the agenda and make sure that those discussed. The items that we've already brought up today are on that docket, but I know conversation was cut off, and so I appreciate you sticking with me here as we tried to get packed through. I think one of the things that we will discuss, I know Mr. Forbes and Mr. Swank brought up the cadence of our meetings, so something that we will entertain at that point too. Yes, Mr. Doggett.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, the board attorney at this first meeting is supposed to talk about Robert's Rules of Order and the Sunshine Law. I was waiting till the end. Obviously, I won't do that tonight. Pretty experienced committee, but certainly Kathy can do that next meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted.
Yes, and I know there are resources. So if you have a burning question about Sunshine Law, or if you want to get yourself, I think the Lee County Library has Robert Rules of Order. It's wonderful reading. All right. On that note, 12 minutes late, I will entertain a motion to.
Mr. Sund, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know we're talking about a meeting to let RSM know what our future audits may be or what we want besides the contract administration audit. I'm looking at, I need 7 days to notice. So at this point, as of today or tomorrow, and at this point, anything from the 17th on is a valid date for me to get it noticed and to advise everybody of when it would be. The next board meeting is on the 29th of July. I don't know if we want anything that Mr. Newland may be able to present in the workshop or whatever, as to what our plans are or how it would be presented to the board. But I'm looking at the 23rd, which is 2 weeks from tonight, as a possible date. And that would give me time to notice everybody, get everything distributed out that people want to peruse for their reading pleasure.
There's also another
so-
board meeting a week later on August 5th, so you may want to consider that too, Dawn.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause we're going to the board on August 5th.
Okay.
I do think, Don, we've been able to address the most urgent matter in that we have a recommendation of action that can start immediately. That being said, while we have everybody here, how does the 23rd look to get something back on the docket to really talk about that full plan? And hopefully if we can get that full discussion, that will give RSM sufficient time for their presentation and prep.
23rd works for us.
It works for me too.
Good.
All right. Then, Don, do we need a motion to schedule that?
I'll have to refer to Mr. Dodig on that. I don't believe so. I think we've always just discussed it and said the next meeting will be on this date, or to let
Yeah.
me know that you can make it.
I'm gonna bear on the side of caution and just if you could just have a motion, Mr. Sun, get a motion in a second, vote on.
Absolutely. All right, I will entertain for a motion on July 23rd. That will be at 5:30 via Teams for our normal schedule there. Do I have a motion?
So move.
I got a motion by Mr. Cohen. Mr. Forbes, I'll take your so moved as your second.
Yep.
All right, got the affirmative head shake there. So we're good there. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none opposed, show that unanimous. So we will have the meeting on the docket and we will begin to dive into all of our additional items here.
Right.
Now, Don, at this point, before I get us our hopes up again, am I good to adjourn us? If I can get a motion?
I'm good. I'm good. And I'll contact you at some point the remainder of this week to discuss the agenda and what all we want on it.
I already have a draft email going to you, so I apologize
You
that
are
you're gonna
awesome.
have an after-hour email here. But at that point, if I could entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
I got a motion from Mr. Forbes. I have a second from Mr. Swink. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good job.
Ms. Giovanelli, are you still there?